Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Dr. Lynn Carey. Dr. Lynn practiced chiropractic medicine in Delaware for 18 years and has been on mission trips to Brazil and India, providing alternative care. During her practicing years, she gathered a lot of insight about healing and the impact of chronic stress on our health, our wealth, and our relationships. Through her teachings, she now empowers others to create peace, balance, and harmony in all areas of their lives by overcoming stress and imbalance in their mind, body, and spirit. Welcome, Lynn. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, Tanya. Thanks for having me.
So you and I, we're going to talk about the impact of chronic stress on our healing journeys. And so I'd love for you to start off with your story and how your struggles led you towards your own self-healing journey. And then as a result, it was also a product of you becoming a chiropractor. So could you please kind of walk us through what what your healing journey has looked like over the past several years?
Yeah, so, I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. Well, actually, I do. I do know that I was very depressed as a kid. Like, I just wasn't inspired by life. Like, I thought there has to be more than what I'm being shown. And I hated school, even though I was an honor student, worked hard. I felt like I was in prison. And it really gave me anxiety every day. And so eventually I was diagnosed at 14 with scoliosis, which is curvature of the spine. And what I've learned now is that, when your spine goes in two different directions, I had an S-shaped curve, you're being pulled in two different directions. So I feel like I had this, you had this pull of there has to be more to life. And I also had being told that, no, this is it, from my family, society, all this thing. So I definitely matched that emotional frequency of that disease, but I was only in the mainstream medical world at the time. I was braced for scoliosis. They wanted me to wear it till I was like done growing, which would have been 18 or 19. It was awful. Mm-hmm. So, and then an orthopedic surgeon came along and said, hey, you'd be a great candidate for the surgery. You'd be done in 6 months, whatever. And I thought, you know what? I'm open to it because I just want to be done with this brace.
Yeah, and it's
I had no idea
hard
what I was getting into.
Through that. I remember seeing someone in my class that had to wear that brace, and I always felt for that person.
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, it's like a brick. It feels like it's as hard as a brick wall, and it goes from your armpits to your hips, and it wraps around you, and they want you to wear it for like 23 out of 24 hours a day. It's insanity. So I just wanted to get rid of that. I didn't know what I was doing. But when I was in the hospital having the surgery, I just remember, oh, this is a respite from my life. Like, this is a break from my life. So I always remember that because I think people go through that when we create disease in our lives. It's to break out of that matrix, it's the opportunity. So I had the surgery. It was a success itself, but I was left I didn't have symptoms before the surgery. Afterwards, I was sick or in pain on and off for the next 5 years, and no one could have an answer for me. Every medical doctor I went to never had an answer for me except another drug. And they never connected it to the surgery. They would never admit that could actually cause my problems. They don't talk about those things. So I just was in college trying to find myself. I thought you had to go to college to be successful in life. Didn't really like it, but there I was. And someone told me to look into chiropractic, and they gave me a pamphlet on it. And I thought, I read it, and it just struck me. It said the power that made the body heals the body. And I thought, why didn't anybody tell me this in the last 5 years, And I just went. It was like the first time I heard truth. I just went to chiropractic school, and it changed my life.
What a fascinating story. And isn't it funny how you struggled with back issues and then now you're helping others with that too. But what I love about chiropractic medicine is it's multi-dimensional, it's multi-tiered. So, I know when I was going to my chiropractor when I lived in Florida, I was having all these emotional outbursts happening after I was having my adjustments. And at the time I knew what that meant for me because I was working with the emotion code and EFT tapping. And so I was actually being empowered to say, okay, as I was being adjusted, I knew that those emotions were starting to bubble up and I was able to move through them, but not everybody is aware of that. So Lynn, during those 18 years that you were practicing, what types of realizations were you seeing when those patients were coming in? And, how were you kind of seeing things from an observational standpoint versus being kind of in your own body and experiencing those for your own self?
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like I had to connect the dots for people, though, that the emotional and mental state of your body comes out physically.
Mhm.
And that can happen when you have an adjustment too. Sometimes you start to feel more. It's not that your, pain or body expressions or symptoms are bad. It's just being aware that this is what's happening as your body rebalances itself and you get reconnected back to your body. Sometimes we're so disconnected or we're storing so much crap in there that we don't want to deal with, that it stirs it up when you get adjusted, or vice versa. People were coming in. I felt more often I would see that people were coming in thinking that the high stress that they were living in was normal and never connecting it to why they felt the pain in the body or
Mhm.
the symptoms that they were feeling. So I always felt like I had to bridge that gap for them.
That's amazing. And it's important, because not all chiropractors do that. I've been to several, and when I first moved out to the Pacific Northwest, I went to one that practiced the Atlas type of technique. And I was suffering with some really severe back pain. Now, I know now I was out of alignment energetically. I can see it from a multidimensional standpoint from my perspective now, but back then, this was 5 years ago, I couldn't. And as I was getting adjusted, my nervous system was reacting so powerfully. I couldn't walk. I lost all function in my lower half of my body, but I was really being strongly guided to go within. And I know you talk about that as a part of your self-healing journey, the importance of us going within and really, listening to our body. Not a lot of us are doing that. We aren't, my whole show, this is what it's about, is tuning into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. And so, as you were going through this journey, Lynn, what were some of the biggest obstacles that you were, being presented with that maybe some of the listeners might be dealing with as well?
I think the one thing I remember is don't be afraid of the pain. When I made peace with the pain I was in is when it really started to heal. Because when you're afraid of it, you're actually creating more pain because it's that gripping, you're gripping on holding on. But when I started to really understand how the body functions, that it's always doing what it needs to do to heal itself. And just because you feel more doesn't mean it's bad. I could start to let go and trust that my body was doing, it was smart. It knows what it's doing. Like it's doing a million functions every second of every day, and we're not controlling it. So when I could trust that, I started to really heal, and I could let go of the fear that I wouldn't get better. And so I think if people can remember that, to trust in the body that it knows what it's doing, and to let go of some of that fear. I think the fear is really what holds us back.
I 100% agree. Looking back at that time of my life, I had quit my 3D job, started my business, moved across the country all by myself. I went from sunny Florida to the winter of Spokane, Washington. My whole body was in this fight, flight, or freeze response. And it was almost like, here is your graduate test to see if you can really go within to heal this. And at the time, I was looking for all these healers outside of me. But my lesson during that time was, Tanya, you've got everything within you. And I'm laying in bed. All I could do is lay in bed and muscle test and cry, heal these emotions, move them out. And so for me, that was my, healing journey. And many, are going through a journey where they are reaching out and meeting other healers such as yourself. And that's where they're at. And I've been in places where I've been at that point too. But then there's also a point when everything gets turned back, and says, okay, it's time for you to go within. And so, Lynn, I want to talk about chronic stress because I worked in the healthcare industry for nearly 20 years around grieving families. And my level of chronic stress, I don't even think there's a scale for it because I was so inundated by it. And I see a lot of people going through this now, a lot of people that I work with, and I'm sure you're seeing it with some of the people you're working with. So what areas can stress kind of really take over our lives?
I think that's the key to everything. Like it is the stress. And that's what I saw in practice. I realized people were living in the rat race. I love that term by Robert
Yes.
Kiyosaki, with his Rich Dad Poor Dad book, because really we are living in the rat race. I saw people not enough time, not enough money, and that affects everything you do, from how you heal to the time you can take off to the choices you make with your healthcare. And I thought, this is complete craziness how people are living. And it really upset me. I'm like, I had purpose in life. I loved what I did. I feel like that changed everything on my healing too,
Mhm.
finding that purpose. I saw people so not passionate in their life, just existing to
Yeah.
make ends meet. And I thought, people need to feel their joy. People need to just be able to enjoy the day, at least some parts of it, not just be constantly on the go in this crazy busyness, paying bills, running after their kids. Like, I just thought, how can they heal in this? And the only time that maybe something will get their attention is if their body fully breaks down to make them stop and
Yeah.
and analyze their life. So I really feel like stress was the key component of how people healed.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because once my stress levels started to go down, I began to recognize my body started to relax. But then I went through a subconscious program that I had to kind of clear on a more mental and emotional level, that you've been in fight, flight, or freeze for 20 years and now you're not in it. What is going on? The body was still in restriction mode. And that's when I would wake up in the morning and I called it rigor mortis because that's what it felt like. My whole body would tense. The moment I opened my eyes, my whole body would go hard, and I would be like, ah! It was almost like my body was trying to do an adjustment or trying to align me while I was there in bed. But it was so, I didn't want to open my eyes because I knew it was like so painful. But it's funny how once you begin healing the physical, all these other layers start to present themselves. And was that part of your experience as well, Lynn?
You couldn't have said it any better, 100%, because we are all energy. Even this physical dense body that we think is physical and dense is just different frequencies. So your emotional, your mental states, your body frequency, your relationships outside of yourself, the money energy, the energy of how you spend your day. All these things are your frequency flow.
Mhm.
So, when you start to make changes, it's going to be affected in different areas, good and bad. So sometimes you just have to honor the process of things collapsing. And, we're taught that we should be busy all day long and struggle and work hard. I mean, that is the theme of mainstream society. And that's what was making me sick, because I was an overachiever. I was crazy perfectionist.
Mhm.
And if I didn't get things done, I didn't know how to, my family didn't rest. We just worked all the time. They weren't happy doing it either, but it
Yeah.
didn't matter. You had to be the martyr. You had to buck up and do it. That's how you were worthy. So to change that is a process. It changes the frequency of your body. It changes the state of your emotional, because you feel like a fish out of water. Like, you're like, okay, now I'm not busy all the time. It's like there's a guilt there. There's a little bit of monkey chatter saying I should be doing something. I got to get that done. But you don't realize you're more productive when you allow yourself to relax and get into a divine action zone, right? Like, you can be inspired to take the action. And a lot of things that we busy ourselves with aren't even important, but it's just a reprogramming, a changing perception, changing beliefs, changing habits.
Yeah, and that's hard to do that. I
Very
think
hard.
for me, at least in my healthcare job, I was up at 6 in the morning and out the door by 7:30, 8 o'clock. And now my most productive time, you can see when I book my podcast, it's usually 11 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m. That's my most productive time in the day. And it's not because I'm sleeping in till 11 a.m. I'm getting up, I'm doing, I'm meditating, I'm doing some yoga. I've got a nice little routine in the morning that I have. And then I have those productive hours. And then after that, that's when I take a walk or I do things that bring me, like you talked about, joy, peace, and harmony. And it takes a little bit of time to get yourself to switch off that I've got to be out the door by 8 o'clock, and then I'm not getting home till 8 at night. And, you've just got this constant, go, go, go. And I grew up in that too, Lynn. It was just like, you got to work your tail off to make ends meet. And so, what advice do you have for those out there who might be, first of all, waking up to this, to the aspect that they're actually what you call it the rat race. I call it the hamster wheel. It's like you're just constantly spinning. What advice do you have for people who might be realizing that, wow, this is my life. How do I change it? What do I need to do?
Well, I think the first question is, I always say, are you living your desired life? And I think when you ask that question, what would your desired life look like? And maybe parts of your life is how you want it to look. But I think right away, those parts that 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 they're the things that you want to change, right? Immediately. So I think journaling is so important. Putting pen to paper, I think it does something to the brain. I think it's very healing. And you can just jot out, like, what would you like your life to look if you could really change? I think some people are even afraid to admit that they want to change certain things because they think it's impossible,
Mhm.
or their vision could never happen. But I'm going to say just humor yourself and play the game, because you don't realize you're opening yourself up to other possibilities when you write it out and just acknowledge, and you just bring awareness and validity to your dreams and what you want, because that is source talking to you, God talking to you. You have those dreams, those visions for a reason. And so you just have to start with the most pressing issue. It could be your health, it could be, your money, but you really just, it might be learning about the topic that you want to change, or visiting a healer, finding somebody you resonate with, or just learning to take, 5 to 10 minutes out of your day to enjoy a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, or to just journal every day, right? Make lists of what you're grateful for, a gratitude list of things that you appreciate, things that you inspire you every day,
Mhm.
to take that time, because now you're going to turn yourself inward and listen to your own thoughts and your own guts and your own voice. That's that's the place to start, and eventually you're going to be led to the next step. It doesn't have to be like this grand gesture. It could be small baby steps, just like that.
Yeah, and and those are simple things. You can set aside 10 or 15 minutes for those, right? So for those of you out there saying, I don't have time, I don't have time, you make time, right? We prioritize our health, our wealth, our relationships. And I think that was difficult when you're in the hamster wheel or the rat race, because you're constantly, I know for me, it was just, I felt like those greyhounds in a race, just chasing the rabbit in front of me. And I couldn't get out of that until I stopped, until my body was screaming at me with all of these alarm systems saying, you're in pain all the time. What's going on? It's time for you to look at me, look at me, look at the pain. And I did a show on this, and how the pain is what's screaming at us. The pain wants to be acknowledged. The pain wants to show us what that lesson is. And I know, when you're in that stressful energy, it's very restrictive. It feels very tight. But when you're in a state of calm, peace, or balance, you've got this really expanded energy. And I'll notice that when I'm less tense and stressed, people will come up to me and kind of flow into my reality. And you seem really chill. And which is funny, because I was never really chill, growing up in that very fast-paced environment. And so, Lynn, what do you think about productive stress and unproductive stress? Is that a thing?
I do. I think, yeah, I think sometimes you want to feel stress. There's a good stress, right? And I think it's when you are in a productive stress, like you're doing things that are important to you, they uplift you, they excite you. So it's like taking inspired action versus doing things because you have to get them done and they're dreaded. And it's not that you can't accomplish them, but maybe if you can be more mindful of when you fit them in. And I think that's just a little bit of time management. Like really focus. You could plan the night before, plan the next day out, or what are the top 3 things that you have to get done, or what are the things that have to be done tomorrow, and then maybe what do I have to fit in, or really question how am I spending my day.
Mhm.
Like look at your activities and where can you fit in some time to journal, to just be, to take a walk, and maybe cut out some of the stuff or some of the people who are just draining your energy and it's not really necessary. So it's
Yeah.
really an evaluation process.
It is. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's important for us to look at our energy drains. What's draining us? Are there certain people? Are there certain projects you might be working on at work? Is it your phone? Oh my goodness. This was the first thing I did. Turn your ringer off, put it on vibrate, do something that's less calming. I've worked with several clients that I had a homicide detective, and he said he gets PTSD when he hears a certain ringtone. And I said, I can totally empathize with that, because working in the trauma department, I hear certain tones and it immediately takes me right back to that time. But you can also turn off your news alerts, turn those off, because what's happening is if you're waking up first thing in the morning, looking at your phone, and then you're seeing all these news alerts, it's immediately like you've hooked up to an energy drain, right? So it's just draining every ounce of you, and it's allowing the external environment to guide your day. You're not setting the tone for your day if you're allowing the cell phone to set the tone for you. And so these are basic things, and it seems kind of easy to do these things, but not everybody takes the time to do that. And, what are some tips and tools that you might have, Lynn, for people to try to alleviate their stress just a little bit?
Well, you just sparked a great idea for me when you said that, to turn off things that you don't want to see. But how about programming things that you do want to see?
Yes.
Maybe getting quotes of the day, or record your voice. How do you want your day to go? How do you want your life to look? Or different things that inspire you. How do you want to feel or be during the day? You could listen to a minute recording of yourself on your phone to start your day with, or music, or something that makes you happy or calms you, right? So you can start incorporating those things around your day. Like, I always have quotations around, and things I like to read, or different people I like to listen to who get me in the zone, So it's putting those things in your life. Like, you could do it on your commute to work, or just while you're cooking, or while you're doing your cleaning, things like that. You can listen to things that will change your vibe and give you ideas.
Yeah, and that all charges your battery up versus draining your battery. And one simple thing you can do too is, the moment you open your eyes in the morning, don't jump right out of bed. Lay there. You're in a beautiful theta state. The moment you fall asleep and the moment you wake up, that is such a impressionable time in your subconscious where you can actually create things in that theta state. And so many are, they hear their alarm and they're freaking out, and then they jump out of bed, and then they start off with stress, right? The moment you open your eyes, if you're leading yourself in that way, you're immediately starting yourself off with a stress frequency, versus just laying there in bed, giving yourself 4 or 5 minutes to take some deep breaths in, visualize how you want your day to go, and then slowly start your day. Those are just some very simple tips that Lynn and I have both shared that you can do. That's very easy, that if you're like, I'm in this state of stress, I don't know what to do. And so Lynn, you've written
Can I interrupt you one more? I just thought of something else too, and I do this every day, and I feel like I'm in a pretty good connection with my own rhythm. And this is something that you can do even if you're living in that high-paced, high-stressed world. Notice how you're feeling throughout the day. Check in maybe even once an hour and just say, how am I feeling? If you notice when something's really stressing you out, how in the moment can you change your perspective to have a compassionate viewpoint if someone really made you mad? It's not to say that you can't honor the feelings of the anger or whatever, but if you're living in that chronic state, maybe you can make breakthroughs to change how you're feeling in the moment, change the perspective, because it'll allow for you to create more of those times in your life, right? And maybe even the busyness will change. The time management will change because it'll start breaking up that fight or flight syndrome, right? So it's just in the moment, because I do that all the time. Like, how am I feeling right now? If I know I need to take a break, or am I in a negative spiral thinking, I'll reorganize myself, take a minute to refocus.
Oh, that's a great point. And what that's doing is it's resetting neural pathways, right? So it's like we're so used to doing, going one path. And then when we take a moment to stop and really check in, and this was one thing I used to do, because I used to have to talk to grieving families, at the hospital. And there were days when I just felt like I was going from one to another. And I got to a place where I would do a practice that I would take a few deep breaths before every family. I would let go of the energy of the previous family, allow my energy to come in, and then I would prepare myself for the next family, where some of my staff would look like a kite in a hurricane, is what I call it, kind of just bouncing around. But these are little things that we can do, is really checking in with our energy. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because many are just like, oh, I'm having this really stressful day and I'm going from one task to the next task. And we talked about that in my last show. I had a master, yogi on there, and he said that we have been programmed to multitask. And not saying I'm excellent at multitasking, but I do notice that sometimes my energy, if I'm not in the right mindset, my energy will be drained very significantly. And so when we really focus our energy on one thing or one task at a time, that's when we're most productive as well, even if you're giving it, maybe 5 minutes or 30 minutes, it really depends. But these are little things that like you said, we're just shifting little programs in our mind that will then kind of ripple out into our external reality, and we'll begin to see things shift from a more external standpoint when we shift things from an internal standpoint. Yeah. And so, Lynn, I want to talk about your book. So you wrote a book called My Journey to Grace, Shattering Mainstream Illusions and Creating My Desired Life. So can you talk a little bit about some of those highlights in the book, and what were some of the mainstream illusions that you realized that you needed to shatter?
So I had a full-on awakening happen when I was 27 years old, and it was after my third trip to Brazil. I went to Brazil 3 years in a row, and I had kind of huge different shifts that happened each year. But what I tapped into was just this high love vibe, this high frequency of love. And the first year it was triggered because I was around the whole group of chiropractors. We were adjusting people all day long. So we were just without speaking, because they spoke Portuguese, we spoke English. And it was just through our energy work that we created this vibe of really a high vibration. And when I came home, I crashed. It was like, oh, now reality feels awful.
Back to the States.
And the third year, I had this experience where I went into a very high vibrational state when I came home, and I stayed there for like 18 months. Like every quarter, it seemed like every season, I went a little deeper into it. And it was just this feeling, I call it my grace state. And that's why I named my book My Journey to Grace, because I realized this is what everybody's looking for. We want to, because I felt this without any external stimulus. I didn't, it's like falling in love, but there's no other person. I was just in love with life, myself, with other people. And what I considered problems, they were laughable. They weren't even problems anymore. It was just so ridiculous. And I just had compassion and love for everything in my life and everyone. And that's, I feel like, what everybody's looking for when they go to party, when they go to take a drink, when they go to take the drug, when they go to for the next relationship, when they go for the more money. They're because we get a glimpse of that high, but it's not lasting. This was lasting, and I realized, okay, this is the frequency we can be on. And now I realized I wanted the rest of my life to be as free as I felt inside. I realized I didn't make choices, or I didn't align the rest of my life from this place. It was more from outside in, like a struggle point where I wanted it to feel free in every area of my life from this high vibe. So that's really what I went through. And that's really what my book's about, my journey to doing things outside what society tells us in every area.
Yeah, and I've traveled to more than 50 countries. I think in my 30s, I went through this time in my life where I was just crazy travel. And I do think that traveling and seeing other cultures really opens you up to that as well. I know we get part of being in my matrix is being in the United States. And when I get to travel, which sounds like you as well, Brazil and India, beautiful places. I haven't been to either one of those, but they're on my list. And so, when you get an opportunity to see how other cultures live and they don't take things as seriously as we do here, say in the States, you're like, wow. Like I'll say when I went to Greece and Italy, I felt that they would spend hours on a meal and they would just chill and enjoy each other's company. You don't do that here in the States. You're grabbing something on the go, eating it in your car, headed off to your next task, And so what are some things that you can share that maybe in India and Brazil that you learned that would be of benefit, for the listeners and myself?
So it's kind of like for me, it was a polar opposite experience. I felt like in Brazil, it was this very soulful experience where they didn't have much, but they were happy. You could tell they enjoyed their life. They weren't on American time. And in fact, I remember this was in 1999 to 2001. So it was before we had our cell phone attached to our hips for everything, but I used to wear a watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped wearing my watch after my first Brazil trip because I realized I didn't want to be on that time anymore. I wanted to be in soul time, but I was a little disgusted with American way of life. I'm like, we're so busy, we don't appreciate, we're not mindful, and we're so materialistic. So I was a little disgusted with American life. But then when I went to India and I went to Calcutta, I was in probably the poorest place. And it was so, like, the pollution was so thick and it was so dirty and so chaotic that I thought, okay, I can appreciate the materialism of America now.
Yeah.
It was almost like it made me appreciate it. So I thought, we could just take the pros and cons, things that we like from each person that we meet, each culture that we meet, to create our own reality, because we can do that in our own life to create our desired life. So I thought that's really what I took away from these travel experiences.
Yeah, and in the, and you even touched on it, time doesn't exist. It exists on how we create time, right? So in the States, we're creating very busy time where you said, and I always joke with some of my Spanish friends because they take they show up 2 hours later and they're like, oh,
Spanish
I'm on
time,
Puerto
yeah.
Rican time, or, whatever. And I'm like, man, I want to be on Puerto Rican time. Now I'm on now I kind of am, because I've learned that they really feel into it, and they know, they take their time with things, and they'll get there, and when they get there, but they have a really fun time when they get there. So I love that you experienced that as well, because I did too. I remember I was in Turkey and we were in Ephesus. Actually, we were going to see where Jesus and Mary, one of their homes where they lived. And we were in this beautiful sacred ground where John the Baptist was baptized. And we were getting into this beautiful baptismal. And this man who lived on the outskirts of this sacred site came up to me and my friend that I was with and offered us a cup of tea. And I was like, what? Like, for me, he kind of singled the two of us out, and we sat down. He didn't speak a lick of English. We didn't speak a lick of his language, but we enjoyed a beautiful cup of tea together. And like you said, that feeling of love, that feeling of, we're connecting without words. It was just this beautiful energy transference between there was four of us. Actually, it was him and his buddy, and then two, and he was probably in his 80s, this man. And we just sat there, and we smiled at one another, and he was giggling, and we were having a really good time, but we didn't know what any of us, we couldn't speak each other's language. So I know that feeling that you talk about when you said that you were adjusting people there and you all were connecting to this love energy. It just felt very giddy, very, high frequency, very light and loving. And so, in your experience, Lynn, is there little things that we can do to get us more into that frequency, to get us more into that feeling of love and lightness?
Yeah, I think it's pay attention to what makes you happy, because it's important. Notice those moments where you feel inspired, whether it's being with a little dog or you see an animal outside, sitting in nature, taking walks, certain people you're around, like books or interviews, like the videos, the podcasts, or whatever you want to watch. Notice what inspires you, because that's important. I think sometimes we push that off to the side, like that's frivolous. But really, that's the most important thing you can do for yourself, because that's nourishing your soul. And if you can learn to honor those moments, you'll be given more. And you'll learn to take productive action from the happiness, not the struggle.
Yes.
And I think that's so key. I think we're really meant to create heaven on earth. And that's the key turning point to doing it.
It is. And I think many of us have been living hell on earth, right? We've
Yeah.
created that since the day we were born, many of us. So we have the power within us to shift that frequency, to shift that. And, when we're inspired, we're in spirit, and you feel that, you just feel this lightness about you. You feel this very flowy. And it was funny, I chose this background picture of this beautiful lake, and I was feeling that the flow, that water energy, and moving from that place of restriction to a more flowing energy takes a little bit of time to get there. But once you do, wow, the synchronicities come in, the connections come in. Those, like you said, the more you feel into those moments, the more you will attract more of those moments into your life. And that's definitely been my experience. And I'm like, okay, show me how much more, you can show me this love
Yeah,
frequency, because
agreed.
I want to feel it. So Lynn, this has been a really fun conversation. Is there anything else that you feel that maybe we didn't touch on that would be of benefit to the listeners?
No, I just think the key is really, your happiness is important, because that's really your immune system, because we are energy. So you can feel the endorphins, feel when you are happy, how your body energy feels like your body's kicked in at 100%. The life force is flowing through you. When you're stressed out, feel how you turn it off a little bit. Not off, you're still working, but see how you slow it down, you tighten up. Like, there's a big difference there. That's the key to healing. Either you're flowing or you're not. And if you can really tap into those moments every day, like to become aware of that, how you're flowing your energy, that's the key to life.
It really is. And that's so powerful. Sounds so simple. Follow your joy. Follow your joy. I did a show on the joy frequency. And when you're in that frequency, how much amazing things can happen. And so thank you for, sharing that. And so I wanted to just end the show with, if you could tell us a little bit more about some of the services that you provide and how people can connect with you.
Yeah. So I have a website, creatingmydesiredlife.com. You can go on there and ask me a question. You can find my book. You can get on my mailing list. I do have a masterclass that I put together. It's just a series of videos that can help you to create your desired life. It's kind of like if you were to get a consult from me, I did it in video form. I have healthy habits coaching, and I have creating another stream of income, business mentorship coaching. So they're just ways, they're all kind of aspects to create this whole package of creating a desired life. And I do like free 15-minute consults if you just want to, chat with me and see if I'm a fit for you or not.
That's great. Well, thank you, Lynn, for coming on the show. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your healing journey. I know that's not always an easy thing to do. And I really appreciate the energy that you're putting out into the world. I can feel it. And like I said, I play a frequency in the background of every one of my shows, and we're playing the 528 frequency, which is the love frequency. So I could feel that energy off of you. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here. It really was a joy talking with you. I know you totally get it, and I know you feel that love bliss vibe. So I love when somebody knows what I'm talking about, because I feel like we can create it here, right in this space.
I agree. You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the emotion code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.